Wow. Nice work, everyone. Good morning. This is amazing. Thank you guys all for coming. So I want to start our program for the Open edX 2016 conference. Thank you all for coming. We have a really exciting lineup of speakers, both from all different types of backgrounds, academic, corporate, NGOs. It's really exciting, the number of people who are involved in making this conference happen, as well as the number of people who have come and join us to learn more about the incredible platform that is the Open edX platform. So to start us off, I'd like to introduce Dr. Jennifer Whittam, computer science professor here at Stanford.
Thank you very much. My job is to welcome you to Stanford. I understand that the previous 2 years the conference was held on the East Coast. I hope nobody's complaining about coming out here this week. Looks like it should be a nice week. So first of all and foremost, welcome to Stanford. I wanted to just tell you a little bit about my experience with online learning, massive online learning. I was department chair of computer science for 5.5 years, and there's a very few number of days that are very memorable from that 5.5 years. I'm going to tell you about one of them, which was the day I came into the office. It was, I think, August of 2011, and the department manager says to me, "You need to see a web page that Sebastian Thrun has put up." And that web page was his introduction to offering his artificial intelligence class free to the world. It came completely out of the blue. He hadn't told anybody about it in advance. He just put it up there and said, "My Stanford course is now available to everybody. And by the way, you're going to be compared to Stanford students, and you're going to get a Stanford certificate," and so on. A few of those things quickly went away. But what did not go away was Sebastian's course, and I really think that very day was a big turning point, not just for me as chair or Stanford, but for all of us in online education. So he did launch his course in the fall of 2011, as most of you probably know, and Andrew Ng, who was also interested in online learning, and myself, who I'd been preparing some materials to put online for my database course, decided that we would join Sebastian and we would also offer our courses. Andrew's was a machine learning course and mine was a databases course. We'd offer them also in the fall of 2011. And I have to say, it was really fun. I, forgot about my research group, forgot about being department chair. I threw myself into it completely, and I had a great time. I felt like a pioneer, and it was fun to work with Andrew and Sebastian as this new MOOC idea, wasn't called that at the time, got launched. So I did offer a class in databases, and it had quite a lot of content. I had lots of quizzes. I had automatically checked SQL exercises that one of my graduate students helped implement. I did XML, XQuery, all kinds of stuff, quite a bit of functionality. Like I said, I threw myself into it. Those materials are still available, still being used on a daily basis, probably as we speak. My materials have been on 4 different platforms. I think maybe every possible, well, no, there's a few now that haven't been on. The first platform was actually in the fall of 2011. Sebastian's course was on what became Udacity. But Andrew and I had our courses put on a platform that was hastily being built by some amazing students. So they were about 1 day ahead of us, building the platform. But they were remarkable. I had been using a quizzing system that Jeffrey Ullman developed called Gradients many years before that sort of automatically generates new versions of quizzes every time people take it. And those students implemented that. They helped with my SQL exercises. They were amazing. So that was the first platform, and let's call that the pre-Coursera platform, because those were the students who then went with Andrew and Daphne to form Coursera and, of course, build the Coursera platform. So once Coursera was built, I moved my materials over to Coursera. The next thing that happened was Stanford launched the Class to Go effort. How many people know about Class to Go? Okay, so Class to Go was Stanford's internal open source platform. So I then moved my materials to Class to Go and had an offering on Class to Go. And then finally, when Class to Go merged with edX, I moved my materials to Open edX. I do think I'm fortunate that each time I moved my materials, I was one of the first. Do we want to do something about the screen? No. I was one of the first courses on the platform, so I kind of got personal service each time, which certainly I took advantage of. The last thing I did with the course, and it was a couple of years ago now actually, is it was a 10-week course, a very thorough databases course. And what I decided to do was take the course and break it into 14 mini courses. So really self-contained small modules. And I think we all know that's probably the right way to go with this type of thing. So I made 14 mini courses, and then I designed different pathways through those courses depending what students want to learn. And it's on Open edX, and they can take the mini courses and generate their certificates. And as I said, it's got a steady stream of traffic. And that's where I've left it. I actually don't do anything. I spend 0 time on it. But it's still, everything's working great. So it's very gratifying that with no effort, I'm still affecting people. And I have to say, the gratitude of the students that I've had is incredible. The first offering, that fall of 2011, I got flowers in the mail, I got candy, chocolate-covered strawberries arrived on dry ice. So I did have a lot of grateful students. On Stanford Alumni Weekend, when the alums come, a middle-aged woman knocked on my door and said I had saved her life. She was home with young kids and going nuts, and then she found these courses and she'd thrown herself into them, and it made a big difference for her. I still run into people who recognize me from the courses on a regular basis, and I just wanted to give you two anecdotes very recently when I ran into people. I was at University of Illinois visiting the department there, and a young student comes down the hall and he looks me up and down. He says, "Professor Whittam, you have a lower half." So, so this student, I'm on, for those of you who have seen it, you can see this much of me, about what you can see now on the video. So he was quite a charismatic individual. He told me that my class had convinced his parents to allow him to drop out of high school. So apparently he was very bored in high school, and he started taking some courses, and he showed them my course. I don't know why mine specifically, and they got convinced. He dropped out of high school. He spent a year designing and building a custom wheelchair for his grandmother, which he showed me all the specs for, and then he was admitted to University of Illinois, where he is now a student. Even more inspiring is a trip I took to India in January. I was a speaker at the ACM India conference. There were about 1,000 students at that conference, and a surprisingly large number of them had actually taken my course, and I knew because I had to take a picture with every single one of them after the conference. But what sticks in my mind is a woman who came up, and again, a woman who said she was about to give up on a tech career. When she took the course, she did well in the course. It changed her mind, and she was pursuing a master's in computer science, and she started crying when she talked to me. And that's probably the best moment I've had. So obviously, it had a big impact on me to be involved in this. In fact, I'm taking a sabbatical next year, and I am introducing the concept of a MOIC. So you all heard it here first. It's the Massive Open In-Person Course. And partly inspired by the India experience, actually. I'm going to be traveling all over the world offering free short courses in developing countries. So again, it is the MOIC in person, and we'll see how massive I can make it. Okay, so that's a bit of my experience. Again, welcome to Stanford. I'm sure you'll enjoy the conference. Thanks for coming.
Thanks, Dr. Whittam. Oh, this is not plugged in. That's what it is. All right. There we go. Our next speaker, you may be familiar with him, is our founder and CEO of edX, MIT professor, and really inspirational leader. I'd like to introduce Anant Agarwal.
Thank you, Joel. It's absolutely fantastic to be back at Stanford. I spent 5 years here between '82 and '87, and the campus absolutely hasn't changed. Ha ha ha. So the whole building was much older. It's been completely renovated. Absolutely fantastic. I really must start by thanking our hosts at Stanford for bringing us back here. It's really great to be here, and thank you. It's been amazing working with you all. And in fact, I owe a really big, a huge debt to Stanford. In many respects, one could argue that they were the ones who started Open edX. So when we announced edX or MITx, which was the precursor to edX in December of 2011, it's one of those things where I'm a big believer that when you want something to happen and you don't want any changes, you make a press announcement and things have to happen. So we announced it's going to be nonprofit, it's going to be open source. We had no idea how we were going to do all of that stuff, but we announced it. And so we announced it's going to be open source, and so even though in later months and years, people said, come on, how could it be open source? And it's giving away, jewels and all that stuff. We said, we announced it. So you can't go back. So the trick is announce it, and then it just gives you incredible negotiating leverage. And even then, I remember our internal team, we all wanted to make it open source, but the internal team felt, yeah, but this is, do we really want to show people this code and so on? We need to make it perfect. And I heard there was this East Coast, West Coast thing, where in East Coast people want to get things perfect, so they make 20 years to do it. But on the West Coast, 80% is good enough. And the cultural clashes. And so what do you do? And so we want to get it just absolutely right. And so it would take time. But then I really owe Stanford a huge gratitude to tell us, Anand, edX, it's okay. It's good stuff. Put it out there. We will all help you. And that was huge. So our teams met, and I think Stanford's help and leadership in giving us confidence that this, we should just go out and do it was huge. And again, thank you for hosting this conference, and thank you for helping us get it out there. Jennifer, thank you for opening the conference. You talk about serial entrepreneurs in Silicon Valley, but it looks like Jennifer has been a serial pioneer. Each of us worry about trying something new, a new platform once, but she's done it 4 times. So thank you again. You were one of the pioneers. Certainly, Sebastian, I refer to Sebastian as having fired a shot that was heard around the world. And your course was among the early initial courses that really made the MOOC movement to be what it was. For myself, I got into this in a similar way. In 2003, I had built something at MIT as part of OpenCourseware called WebSim. So WebSim was an online circuits laboratory, and I promise you, I wrote the code. I could write code in those days, all right? And so it was cloud hosted in some sense. It was hosted on my computer, and use CGI and Perl and a bunch of other crapola, and somehow put it all together. And it was meant to be a circuits lab for my class. And then I said, wait a second. I made it available to my class. It's online circuits lab. And by the way, it's broken right now, but you can Google WebSim MIT, and you can go to the site today. It's broken right now, but you can still go and see the site. I need to go fix it. But I soon discovered this is hosted openly, so anybody could actually come and take it. So I said, oops, I didn't worry about security. So it actually was an open online lab, or a MOOL, massive open online lab. And believe it or not, in 2005, 6, and 7, when it was open to the world, 300 to 400 students a day would come in and do online circuits experiments. And then when I saw Sebastian and Jennifer and others put up the courses online, I said, duh, how stupid could I have been? Why didn't I do more? Here was my circuits lab completely open. So we said, heck, why don't we do more? Why don't we put everything online? And at MIT, of course, they love giving things away, and so it was easy. And so we put the circuits course online as well, and so it just fun days. Today, I want to talk about some, as we've put courses out there and learned from it, what we're realizing is that as we get really serious about MOOCs, as MOOCs evolve into credit and really serious learning, we have to really think hard about what this all means. What does it mean to have a platform like this? And so today, I'd like to touch on 2 themes. One is innovation. And a lot of what you've seen happening in the MOOC world has been innovation. So a lot of innovation in platforms, in education, in policy, credentialing, and so on. And what I'd like to spend most of my time on is discussing integrity. How do you bring integrity into innovation and build a product or build an educational experience that can be truly, truly lasting? So before I do that, just a quick introduction to where we are today as edX. So as you know, we're a nonprofit founded by Harvard and MIT. You can go to edX.org and take courses. Our mission hasn't changed. You hear about pivoting a lot in Silicon Valley, but as a nonprofit, you don't pivot, you have a mission. If you pivot, then you form a different non-profit. As a nonprofit, you have a mission, and you set your targets on the mission, and irrespective of what happens to the world, you chase your mission. And so this slide really hasn't changed, and I show it in every talk. It hasn't changed in 4.5 years. increase access, improve the quality of education, and do research in learning. So today, we've grown to over 8 million students from every single country in the world. I think about 27 million courses taken, over 100 partners, courses in a variety of languages, about 1,000 courses on our platform. And what is particularly heartening and exciting to me is that on the platforms you all have built as part of Open edX, there's 3 times as many more courses. So there's 3,000 to 4,000 courses on Open edX platforms all over the world. And by last count, and you'll see some of this in the Open edX presentation shortly, the number of learners, we really don't have a good count of how many learners there are on Open edX, but I would not be surprised if there's another factor of 2 in terms of the total number of learners on the platform. So beyond the big numbers, individual learner stories are absolutely amazing, and this one is my most recent one. To follow up on Jennifer's India story, I have my story too. So I was in Bangalore a few months ago, and I just check into my flight, and as I walk out, I see this horde of 20 Indians kind of walking towards me in an amoeboid fashion, and all 22, 23 years old. And one of them comes up to me, this guy, and he says, "Are you Anant Agarwal?" I said, "Who wants to know?" I said, I just checked it. I did not do anything wrong or anything." He said, No. He said, "Thank you. You gave me my life." I said, "Whoa. What do you mean?" And he said, "Thank you very much for you and your partners." He said he was in college. He wasn't very serious about studies. He did engineering of some sort. And then he discovered some of the computer science courses online. He took 3 courses. He took Berkeley Software as a Service in particular, Harvard's Intro to Computer Science, MIT's Python course, and particularly the Software as a Service course taught by Armando Fox and David Patterson out of Berkeley. He applied to Microsoft in India, and largely on the strength of what he'd learned from the Software as a Service course, they hired him into their cloud division. And he said, "I'm completely thankful to you and edX and your partners for what you've done," where he learned the stuff that he was applying in his day-to-day job at Microsoft. The Open edX movement, from the early conversation with Stanford when we very, very trepidatiously put things online, I promise you, every day I was scared, saying, what would someone say? "God, you call this a platform or something?" But we were so scared. But that said, again, we put it out there. And again, thanks to the whole community, you all have really helped bring it to where it is today. And the feature velocity and the solidity is just absolutely amazing. And thanks to all of you for the collaboration and the help. Shockingly, I would never have believed this would have happened. I still don't believe it. Many nations have begun to adopt edX today. Some of the earliest ones were France Université Numérique. Any of you here? FUN, fun folks? There you go, welcome. Xuetang X from China, they launched the Ministry of Education, and Tsinghua launched a national platform in China. Number of others, Durub from Jordan, Edrak from Jordan and Durub from Saudi Arabia. Hong Kong, HK MOOC from Hong Kong, TC Pong and Company. Russia launched a platform September of last year called openedu.ru. And the most recent one, Israel X, is about to be launched. And edX is working with Israel and their Ministry of Education to launch a national platform for Israel where they'll teach courses in Hebrew, Arabic, and English. So this is really becoming a worldwide movement and just absolutely exciting. We're also working with India, and hopefully something big may happen there as well. There are a lot of both private and public entities that are looking to do a lot in that country as well. Very exciting. So a lot of that is what you might call innovation. By bringing technology into education, how can we scale access? How can we improve quality and so on? But what I want to talk about now is integrity. And I think there's a new frontier that I want all of you to think about and help us cross. So if you look at MOOCs, we've talked about numbers. In addition, a lot of the MOOC pioneers, both in the California area, around the world, on the East Coast, have worked on credentialing approaches as well. How do you make these meaningful to learners. And so we started off with the very first course on edX. This was the circuits course on edX. Had a MIT certificate on it. And I think a lot of kudos to MIT for having the gumption to issue an MIT certificate. It's called MITx. That was the key. People were worried about an MIT certificate. So the X was just absolutely incredible branding, where it's not an MIT certificate, it's an MITx certificate. It's a different brand. And that really helped the universities be willing to give certificates, not just email letters and so on, but honest to goodness certificates for completing these courses, branded as the university brand. That was a big step. Following that, we went to sequences of courses. This was about a year and a half later, where people were really worried about sequences of courses. Where one course was fine, but when we first launched X series, this was the first time sequences of courses began to be offered with the certificate. I remember Tamar Lewin came out with a New York Times article that really scared the bejesus out of me. Where they said, it's hard enough getting universities to partner up and offer sequences of courses. Her headline talked about, what will edX offer next? Degrees. So she was making a jump from one course to sequences of courses with a certificate to degrees. But sequences of courses was, again, an X series was, again, a big innovation. And this, of course, has been followed by, in later months, from a lot of the MOOC providers in things like nano degrees and specializations and others. But certainly, it was hard to get the universities to actually offer sequences of courses. The next big milestone was credit. And here, again, huge kudos to Arizona State University for partnering with us to launch Global Freshman Academy, where you can take courses for free. For $50, you can sign up for a verified certificate. And then the beauty is, if you pass, you can pay and get credit on an ASU transcript. Just imagine that concept, pay if you pass. Absolutely brilliant. And you can do this with the near zero marginal cost offered by technology. You can let people learn for free. And then they can pay for success. You don't have to charge people up front. So credit was the next big one. And then the most recent innovation was the MicroMasters. And here again, huge gratitude to MIT for pioneering this and going through all the committees at MIT. So MicroMasters is a very interesting concept. This concept is, again, this is possible with zero marginal cost. The idea here is that you can learn for free. So on edX, that will stay true. You can learn the videos, exercises, homeworks, exams, certificates. The learning part, all the way through to certificates, including exams, are free. And they will continue to be free. If you can take a MicroMasters, a sequence of courses, roughly 1/4 to 1/2 of a master's. You can learn for free, and you can, if you don't want the credential, you can just learn and do the exams and all that stuff for free. You want the credential, you pay on the order of $800 to $1,000 for a sequence of courses. And there is virtual proctoring as part of it. And if you pass, you get the MicroMasters. So you pay to get the MicroMasters credential. It doesn't stop there. There's inverted admissions process. If you get admitted into MIT, and MIT will pay attention to your performance in the MicroMasters, and if you get admitted into MIT, then that MicroMasters credential at MIT will count towards half of your MIT master's degree in supply chain management. Wow is the word. In 4 years, we've come a long way. This is a big, big deal. Because one, you can learn for free. It's really important for our mission. We're not excited about people having to pull out a credit card each time you take an exam. Nope, you can learn for free. You want a credential or MicroMasters, you pay on the order of $1,000, which is about a couple % of what a master's degree might cost. And then an inverted admissions process where the performance in this will be taken into account into admissions at MIT. And if you get in, you can now complete your on-campus master's in half the time and for half the cost. So the moment MOOCs translate into credit, whether at Global Freshman Academy for freshman year or the MicroMasters form, credit is a big deal. And now that we're offering credit for MOOCs, I liken it to crossing the sonic barrier for MOOCs. A lot of good things have to happen in order for us to be able to scale this. The most important thing that comes up is that, wait a second, you've taken a MOOC and that translates to credit on a campus, and at Arizona State or MIT and so on. So wait a second. I understand giving away content for free, but now, how do I know that the student hasn't cheated. Hey, on campus, I give students a timed exam. They need to be able to do things fast and correctly, and not infinite amount of time. I can't let my exam sit out there for the whole world to see. What do I do when people open up multiple accounts, something that Ike Chuang and others at MIT discovered, and open up multiple accounts and harvest questions from a free account, harvest questions from a certificate account by opening up multiple accounts? It's free. So free is both beautiful and also dangerous, because when it's free, you can create 20 accounts and harvest questions from exams. So there are a lot of challenges. And so edX and our partners have been working really hard on trying to bring some real solid integrity into MOOCs. And here are some examples of what we've built into the platform today, and it's available to you all as open source, of course. And some of these are actually built by you all. So again, thank you for the contributions. So one concept is timed exam. So on edX today, when you open the exam, a timer goes off, and the instructor can set the time. The exam will shut down when the timer goes off. Second, the instructor can choose whether the exam stays visible after the timer goes off, or whether the exam gets shut down like so. And so you don't see the exam anymore. So this way, the questions are not sitting out there available for students to look at, much like you would do on a campus. Another example, randomized problem banks. We introduced randomized problem banks as part of a MOOC, and so every student can get a different exam. From the very first day, we've had other randomizations like randomized numerics and so on. The other big thing we did was introduce virtual proctoring as part of all our credit courses. So with the MicroMasters or Global Freshman Academy, when students take these courses and pay to be on the verified track, signaling they want a certificate or credit, they take a virtually proctored exam. And I'll talk more about that in a second. And that really is very, very solid in terms of preventing cheating. And the last idea is the concept of cohorts. The idea is that many times offering specialized experiences like virtual proctoring and so on to some students is expensive. And you want to offer that only for people who pay. So anything that technology can make you scale, offer it for free, automatic grading, all of that stuff. But if certain things cost money, like virtual proctoring or maybe hand grading and so on, then what you do is you create a cohort. So let me talk about both virtual proctoring and cohorts a little bit. So virtual proctoring is a way to prevent cheating when taking the exam. And here's how it works. We partnered with a company called Software Secure. There are many other companies doing it, but here's one example. This is an asynchronous method for students to be able to take exams online in a way that prevents cheating. So when you take the exam, you start the exam, and a webcam kicks off and watches you take the exam. The exam is timed, and the webcam not only captures, the software not only captures you taking the exam, it also captures a screen capture of what else is on your screen, so you can't Google for the answers. Similarly, it also captures audio in the room, so someone cannot shout out the answers to you, and so on. So this video is captured, and this video is sent into the cloud. Now, this video package becomes a part, this record of you taking the exam becomes a part of your record. So just the fact that if I'm taking an exam and the video of my taking the exam, if I know that it's part of my record, that itself is a big enough deterrent. Okay, if I want to get a MicroMasters, no way I'm going to cheat if there's a video of me taking the exam. Heck, I may get caught 7 years later. So that just the act of taking a video is a huge deterrent. It doesn't stop there. A video is shot into the cloud, and companies like Software Secure have hundreds of people off-site. This is like offshoring proctoring, and they watch the video sitting in cubes and really, really watch the video. And these are experts. They can tell when people cheat. So as an example, in some of the Arizona State partnership we've done with Global Freshman Academy, we've actually caught a few cheaters. And so they watch you taking the exam at high speed after you've done the exam. So you don't have to find a person to watch you right then and there. This is part of your record and it's watched later. So this is a very solid way of preventing cheating, and now this has become part of the platform. The other key thing I wanted to deep dive into is cohorts. When differentiated content or different exams and so on are expensive, you can now create cohorts on edX. Now here's the idea. You have the audit track, the people who are learning for free, and we want to give them a good, rich experience, including free assessments and exams and so on. Yet for the certificate learners, you want them to have a high integrity experience so that universities are comfortable giving credit. So here are some examples. What I can do is for the audit track learners, I can give them an exam. Heck, if they want to, there's no certificate, if they want to cheat, they're just shortchanging their own learning experience. I don't care. So you have the same exam visible all the time. But they do have an exam so they can test themselves and see whether they passed the course or not. They can have a learning experience. So in that sense, the exam becomes more of a formative experience for them. But for the certificate learners, the exam is part of a summative experience. It's an assessment. It's a test. And so here what you can do is offer a different exam. And you can do many things. You can create new exams each time. You can have randomized problems in the exam. You can also do things like have a closed timed exam. So while for the learners who are learning, give them an open exam. But for the people who want credit, you can give them a closed timed exam. The exam disappears after the timer. And the exam can also appear at given times of the year. You can say, OK, worldwide, the exam will appear at this time. Boom. So you can do all of these things now. Other thing you can do is that for essays and so on, universities are still are not comfortable with peer grading or AI assessment and so on, although as AI assessment improves, we will get them over that hill. But for now, for example, the English composition course on edX from ASU has credit. It's hand graded. So how do you do it? Hand grading is expensive. So what you do is you offer peer assessment for the audit track learners. And for the learners in the verified or the credit track, you offer hand grading. And they've all paid, and so you can pay for the hand grading. So when services cost money, they can be put into the verified or paid track. And edX, now the platform automatically, when a person pays, they automatically get put into the verified credit track. And so this happens, you don't have to do it manually, it happens automatically. Similarly, you can do no verification for the free track and offer virtual proctoring for the credit track. Another quick example, I really want to encourage the Open edX community to now begin thinking about integrity as well. Not just scalability, but integrity. There's a lot more work to be done, of course. And here's just one example, and I just want to give a call out to Ike Chuang at MIT, where they discovered that, and this has been known, of course, but they did a study where they found that a lot of learners create multiple accounts, where, is anyone from MIT here? Oh, there you are, OK. So they did a study where they found that people would create one account or multiple accounts and then harvest the exam questions and try out multiple answers. And particularly if your exams are multiple choice, it takes 5 accounts or 4 accounts or whatever to get the answer, right? And so what you do is they would create these accounts and then they would create a golden account and then get all their get just really ace exams. So this is just one example in the Open edX community where the team has built a software and an algorithm that does statistical analysis and so on to figure out when that is happening and catch cheaters. And so this is one example. And so I would love to see more such work happening. And over time, we would love to incorporate more of these into the platform. And so I've got an open field here. And at the next talk, I hope to incorporate some of your own work in this place. So with that, let me stop and just think a little bit about once we have things like this and credit and transfer into campus, what might the future look like? And one example of what a future might look like is what Megan Smith, who's the US White House CTO, calls the porous university. But today, universities are very stovepiped. You come in at the bottom, and if you're lucky, you come out at the top, although sometimes people leak out along the sides. And so imagine a porous university where people can come in with 1 year of credit and then continue on for a bachelor's, or come in with half the credit from a MicroMasters and do the second half on campus and complete the other part of the MicroMasters. And edX will be launching a number of these in the foreseeable future for many of our partners. You can also imagine students getting an internship at a company, and while they're doing the internship, doing some purely online courses to get the credit. So really create a new educational environment where students get more choice, where online and in-person education both become part of the mix that students can take for flexibility, for efficiencies, for quality, and really enable instructors and students to be given more choice in terms of how they unpackage, unbundle the university and education, so to speak, and try to get the best of both worlds in these blended experiences over time. So with that, let me close, and thank you all, and welcome you again to the conference. Thank you.
Let's grab that. Let me do this. Ba-ba-ba. Okay. All right.
All right, so our next speaker is John O'Bacon. He's the person who literally wrote the book on open source communities, The Art of Community, as well as a former community manager for GitHub, XPRIZE, Open Advantage, and Canonical. Everyone, please welcome John O'Bacon.
Thank you. All right. How's everyone doing? Is that all you've got? Come on. How's everyone doing? All right? All right. That's more like it. All right. So first of all, I want to say a big thank you to Molly for inviting me to come and speak. I spent some time with Molly in Australia a little while back, and we had a great time. So it's great to be speaking in front of everyone. A little bit of backstory. Recently set up a consultant practice to help companies and organizations build communities internally or externally. And as was just mentioned, I used to spend some time helping to lead community at GitHub, Ubuntu, and XPRIZE. I'm really passionate about how we build communities. I believe that communities are at the center of how we as human beings innovate and build interesting things. And I think most communities today, frankly, are inefficient. And then when we understand the principles of how people work well together, we can innovate faster, we can create better things. And I think edX is a great example of that. So I want to, first of all, tell a little story about a guy called Frank, who the name has been changed to protect the innocent. Frank basically joined an open source project a little while back. He was using the product for a while. He was excited about it and thought, I'd like to scratch my own itch and do something that will be interesting for the project. So he joined up, went to the website, clicked on the community page, and thought, this is the beginning of my adventure. And he was asked to join a mailing list and go and get the code from GitHub. So he went, got the code from GitHub, and he tried to figure it out, found an issue of something to work on, struggled his way through it, and had to contribute this new thing, his new idea, to this community out in the open. And it was terrifying for him. The way he described it to me was like going to a nudist colony for the first time. And he was very self-conscious about how he was looking, whether he was doing the right things. You don't want to inadvertently break the rules that weren't written down. The whole thing was a disaster for him. It was terrifying, it was uncertain, and overall not a lot of fun. And the whole point of building communities is that we build great environments for people to be successful in. And this has been the core of the work that I've tried to focus on throughout my career, is how do we distill the very best ways in which we work together to build great communities. And to me, this is not about having all of the answers, because I certainly don't have all the answers. It's about knowing some of the answers and packaging them up in a way that can be helpful to other people. And I think one inspiration here, bizarrely, is McDonald's. How many here have eaten at McDonald's recently? No one's gonna admit it. The level of sheepishness was ridiculous. And pride. McDonald's, powering edX. Okay. So think about it, though. The thing that's cool about McDonald's, the innovation that Ray Kroc had with McDonald's was, those of you who've been to McDonald's will have probably noticed that the people who work at McDonald's are not necessarily the sharpest tools in the tool shed, right? And if you think about just making fries, you take potatoes and you put them into boiling hot fat for a certain period of time, and then you take it out of that fat, and then you put some salt in it, and you put it into packaging, and you deliver it. And you're supposed to do the whole thing where you have the same level of quality and you're not going to get people sick. So you've basically got people who aren't particularly skilled cooks following complicated processes and delivering predictable results. And to me, that's the whole point of how we build great communities. And I think there are lots of really great methodologies in which we can do this. And over the years, one of the things I've thought about is that we're wanting to build kind of like a suit for people that they can use that optimizes them for the very best community experience. As a fan of Iron Man, this got me thinking, like, what would an exoskeleton look like? Like, how do we infuse this suit with the very best capabilities to help someone to do well? And in the interest of inclusion and diversity, of course, this doesn't just apply to men, okay? We should have Iron Woman suits as well. And it's weird when you type in Iron Man and other terms like women or, you know, I found all of this on the internet as well. There's some weird people on the internet, it turns out. So as I'm talking through this stuff, one thing I want us to keep in mind is that every community is different. You know, when I've worked with companies, a lot of companies, when I've worked with them, say, like, tell us the secrets, how do we do this? And there's no playbook, there's no single way in which you build a community for an organization or for a project. You know, you could take the principles of a very successful community like OpenStack or Linux and bring it word for word into another place, and it just won't work. You've got to adapt it, because this is about building culture. So what I'm talking about here is really about mapping out a blueprint. I'm not going to be delving too specific into the execution principles, because that differs depending on the organization, the project that you're working with. So the idea here is sketching out the map of how we build great communities to get you thinking about some things that you can explore in your own world as well. So the question is, like, what's the point of this exoskeleton? Like, why are we doing this? Why are we building this? And those of you who've been working around technology for a while will be familiar with this thing. It's called the technology adoption curve. And the basic principle is, you know, as technology is adopted, the people at the beginning are the innovators. These are like people like you in the room, like people who are right at the cutting edge of building interesting technology and doing interesting things. And then gradually, those people will inspire the early adopters. And this is when you start seeing, you know, tech websites and conferences starting to pick up on it. And then you get the hump up here is the early majority and the late majority. This is when most people start using it. This is the people who go to the stores, go to Best Buy, and they buy it. The late majority is people who are a little bit slow to the race, and the laggards are my parents. This is basically how technology tends to be adopted. And I think you can take a similar approach and principle in community productivity, in the fact that this is time. So at the beginning, you join a community, and you're not particularly productive. You're doing some interesting things. But the more you spend time there, and the more you soak up the environment, the more productive you are. What's interesting with a lot of communities, and particularly in open source, is when people have been around a community for a long time, their productivity often goes down because they start developing shades of entitlement. And we want to protect against that. We don't just want to optimize people to get in quickly, but we also want to ensure that we reduce entitlement so people are productive, but they're not expecting the world to be built in their shadow. Now, if you look at the technology adoption curve, a core principle of this is called the chasm, which is basically here. And I think the same thing applies in the community productivity model, is that once you get going and you get to a certain point, you've got this little gap that's really difficult to get over. And on the technology adoption curve, before this gap is basically Silicon Valley. And after that gap is basically the brands and products that everybody's familiar with. And getting over that gap is really complicated. And I think it's the same thing with how we build great communities. It's easy to go out there and tell people about how great your project is on social media and to write blog posts and do YouTube videos. But once you get them and once they're interested, that gap can be the thing that stops people participating in your project. And to me, that's the point of this exoskeleton, is to equip people with the knowledge and the skills to get them through that so they can start being productive. Now, in the interest of being a lame presenter, I've got to show Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And everybody thinks Wi-Fi should be at the bottom. You know, we could apply the same kind of principles to how, like, what's important in how communities work. But I think it looks more like this, is that typically what happens is you've got a bunch of people, the shadowy cabal, who primarily discover what you're doing through your product or the focus of your community. So that could be they start using edX, they become fans of the Creative Commons, whatever it might be. And then what happens is they come into this kind of cycle. And the first thing they need to figure out is, how do I actually do something? Like, what's the workflow? In software, that's, how do I get the code? How do I work in the code? What does it look like? How do I understand which issues to focus on? How does code review work? All those kinds of pieces. But then what they need to do is they need to see a picture of their relevance in that world. Some of you may be familiar with this notion called imposter syndrome, which is when people join a company or a community or something like that, and they feel like, they're doing okay, that they're going to be found out at some point. I don't think the world realizes how significant imposter syndrome is in society. It affects so many people. It affected me at the beginning of my career a lot, for example. So I think helping people to see their relevance and value in that community is very important. Then the next piece is relationships. Just like a company, if you don't build relationships, you don't succeed. I just read a story about some guy who worked for a Silicon Valley company who basically automated his entire work and then just sat playing World of Warcraft for 6 years and didn't build any relationships or anything like that, and eventually got found out. However, that is an illustration of how not building relationships lets you get away with nothing for 6 years. So I might be wrong about this. But yeah, see, we want to help people build relationships, because when you build those relationships and you feel that sense of relevance, it means that you grow. Not just in terms of your intrinsic capabilities, such as your skills, but you grow in that sense of being part of something. And the thing that I've been rambling on about for years is the most important thing that we can build in any community is a sense of belonging. When you feel like you belong somewhere, whether it's in a community, whether it's in your family, whether it's in your coffee shop, it feels good, and it means that you want to be there and you want to participate. Because we often forget that we're animals, and when you take away the screens and the computers and everything else, we have a very simple, basic set of drivers, and feeling that sense of belonging is important. So I think to build that exoskeleton, we can break it into 3 areas. We want to make sure that we help people to be effective as people. We want to help them to deliver great best practice in how they engage and build and participate. And then finally, in how they participate, we want to make it easy for people to come in and be successful in the way that they contribute to the community in different ways. So I'm going to walk through each of these, and we'll start with people. Now, we're talking a lot about this fictional exoskeleton, but I think before we can really understand how to build the tactical pieces, we need to understand the principles of what make people people. One of the big mistakes I think a lot of organizations make and a lot of communities make is they go racing for the tactical pieces, like mailing lists and communication channels and Slack and GitHub and all these different pieces. And they forget that all of those bits are tools that serve psychology. And I think looking at that psychology is important. So we need to get underneath the suit. We need to get naked. And this poses a problem as a presenter, because you don't want to put a naked slide up because you're going to get into trouble, because it's not going to be good for anybody. So this is the best I've got. I think that when we look at the nakedness of the human condition, there are basically 2 types of communities, and we need to set expectations in both of those. So there's read communities. These are the communities where people get together to consume something. So for example, people who are into Game of Thrones, or they're into Beyonce, or whatever it might be. A lot of these people get together at events or on forums and things like that because they enjoy spending time with each other. Fundamentally, they're not really building anything together. They're just enjoying being around people with like minds who understand them, who accept them. And that's incredibly rewarding. Right communities are the kind of communities where people get together to build something. edX is a good example of that. Open source Wikipedia is an example of that. The expectations with those 2 groups is very different. So as an example, when I was at Canonical and we were building the Ubuntu community, we started out with the right community, which was people who were contributing to the platform itself. And they were emotionally invested in that platform, and they expected a high level of transparency and openness. But then we built out a separate community of people who would build apps for Ubuntu. And all they cared about was getting the SDK, making sure that it worked and that there's great documentation. They didn't feel like they had to have a hand in how that SDK was created. They were just consuming it. So it's good to define which community we're in, but then I think it's also good for us to define the different roles that we have. And I think that with most communities, you've got 3 approximate roles. New people who are brand new, regulars who are kind of spending a reasonable amount of time there, and then the core people, people right at the center of this, the people who are leading your community in different ways. Now, I think what's very important here is that we define user personas. And this sounds like one of those things that you read about in books that people never do. And that's true. But for us to deconstruct those three different types of persona is very important in understanding not only how we build workflow that works well for them, but also how we target them and help them to consume our messaging to bring them into the community. So I think that there's basically 6 things that we should consider in each persona. The first thing is the capabilities. What can they do? What are their skills? What are their capabilities? The second piece is experience. How much experience have they got? Are they professional? Are they students? What does that look like? The third thing is, what are their motivations? What do they care about? What's interesting to them? Then, what are their fears? What worries them? And in many cases, these fears are never shared. They're just intrinsic in people. Then we need to figure out what are their rewards. You know, for example, the rewards of an enterprise software developer who works in a bank is very different to a software developer who works at a small startup. So what are those different types of rewards? And then how do they consume? What websites, what journals, what resources do they use to consume information? So to provide an example, imagine we're looking at somebody who's brand new to a community and they're working on a web project. So the capabilities, they're probably going to be able to program in something like Python. They may know HTML and CSS. They probably know a bit of JavaScript. They're probably familiar with test-driven development, almost certainly have a mustache or wear their parents' clothes. I'm not bitter. So in terms of their experience, you know, if they're new, they may have some experience at college. They may have participated in a few open source projects. They may have a bit of professional experience, but probably not a vast amount of technical experience. For their motivations, they probably really care about skills development. A lot of people who are new to communities really care about the, by definition, motivated people. Most people don't join open source communities if they just want to go home and watch TV in the evenings. These are self-motivated people, so they care about the skills development. They probably care about respect among their peers, particularly if they're new. Like when you're new to a project, you have no context, no relationships. So respect and gaining respect is very important. They probably want to build, you know, experience and reputation for future employment. And some people may also have a financial incentive, particularly for a student. You don't have any money. You know, if you can make a little bit of money on the side to buy more ramen noodles, then that's a good thing. And then the fears are probably going to be things like social exclusion, just looking stupid. It sounds like a silly thing because there are no stupid questions. But people really care about that and maybe are worried that you'll take on something that's too complicated and then you'll look stupid and then you'll be excluded from the pack. I think in terms of rewards, there are always intrinsic rewards and extrinsic. So the intrinsic rewards, the things that matter to you as a human being, things such as respect, reputation, relationships. But extrinsic rewards are things like financial benefits and material benefits, such as t-shirts, caps, going to conferences, and things like that. And it's easy for us to say, I don't care about the extrinsic rewards. Anyone who says that is a liar. Everybody cares about extrinsic rewards to a certain degree. And then the final one is how they consume. They're probably going to be, this new web developer probably consumes long-form tutorials. They probably read Hacker News. They probably ask questions on Stack Exchange. They watch a bunch of YouTube videos. There's social media that they consume. And you can wrap all of this in demographic information and research as well. So if you're targeting, for example, I was working with a Chinese company who was building the community, and the way in which the Chinese community works is very different to the way in which people work in the West. For example, the Chinese community don't use Slack, they use WeChat, as a tiny example. So making those user personas, I think, is important for our those 3 different types, new, regular, and core. But then I think it's really important for us to look at the heart of what makes us human beings. And I have to be careful here because I'm a bit of a nerd in an area called behavioral economics. And some of you may be familiar with this. The basic principle is that human beings are fundamentally irrational. And I think most of us know that. But we're irrational in very predictable ways. So the classic example here is there was a goal to reduce childhood obesity. And a principal of a school didn't have a lot of money and a lot of capabilities to help with this, but she basically reordered the lunch line. So when the kids showed up, all the healthy stuff was at the front. And kids, by definition, would fill their plates up. And then when they got to the unhealthy stuff, the idea of putting that stuff back is socially weird. So everybody was, even though the kids want the cheeseburger, they don't want the kale. No one wants kale. they're not going to do that. So we're predictable in the way that we're irrational. And behavioral economics, it provides an important blueprint for how human beings tend to think. So the classic example here that I like to talk about is something called the SCARF model, which was created by a guy called Dr. David Rock. And these are basically five principles that are inherent in most human beings that we care about. I won't spend too much time on this because we don't have a lot of time, but so first of all, status. We all care about status. So in communities, it's good for us to define status types like new, regular, and core, and help people to flow between those different status types. We care about certainty. Uncertainty causes stress, it causes burnout, causes problems. Think about when you have a bad relationship with your boss. So we want to reduce the level of uncertainty in communities. Autonomy. People really care about choice. Even if all of the choices line up to the same result. Like when you go and buy a car, they'll ask you what wheels you want, what color it should be, what extras you want. You're still giving Ford all of your money. But the fact that you get to make choices is fulfilling for people. People care about relatedness as well. This is different groups and how they fit together. So a lot of open source communities will have a development team and a docs team and a translations team. This is helpful for scope. And then finally, what was really interesting to me is that his research determined that people not only care about being treated fairly, but they don't like people to be treated unfairly as well. So we want to build a community that's fundamentally fair. Now, I think a really interesting methodology in how we build great things is to take a pattern and then to invert it. And that will tell you the things that you shouldn't do. So for example, imagine you work for a company, you want to build a cell phone. And you'll talk about like a nice screen and the power and the capabilities and the software and all this kind of stuff. Instead, invert the question and say, what would be the worst possible cell phone? So for example, for me, the worst possible cell phone is that I can only receive calls from my best friend because he's really annoying. Or that it's really laggy. And then, or that the buttons are too small for my little stubby sausage fingers, Because what that does is that gives you the things that you should avoid, and then you build functionality into your product that avoids those things. So I think with these principles, the opposite of status are clicks. We don't like clicks. So we should figure out a way of reducing silos. The opposite of certainty is stress. So we should find opportunities to reduce stress and uncertainty in our communities. The opposite of choice are limits. So we should say to ourselves, when we build our communities, never ever have one way of doing things, because it's unfulfilling for people. The opposite of relatedness is chaos. Nobody particularly likes chaos. So having quality structure in how we build our communities is good. And the opposite of fairness is bias. And this has been a heavy topic of conversation, particularly in open source, is reducing bias, whether it comes to gender or sexuality or other different things. We should be explicit in reducing bias. So that covers just a couple of examples of how we think about the people, like really understanding that human blueprint and how we can manage that. For the practice, how we build systems that we engage with, the workflow, I'd like to share one quote. Presenters put quotes into slides to look clever. And that's not my goal here, but this really is a great quote from Albert Einstein. Everything should be made as simple as possible, but not simpler. Some people think that complexity and process is a sign of a mature, complicated project, and that's nonsense. We should make things really easy. I remember I kicked off an open source project years ago to create a very simple multi-track editor for Linux. And some guy posted in a comment, said, this is ridiculous, this is abhorrent to the spirit of open source and choice. If you had your way, you would have an interface with one button that you press, and then it solves all of your problems, wouldn't you? I was like, yes! People talk about how the nipple is the most perfect human interface. It is. It's intrinsic to how kids work. That would be the perfect interface. So let's not think that simple means stupid. It means elegant. The challenge with most communities is that you've got to figure out all these things: code hosting, communication, governance, translations, bug management. This is a lot to squeeze into someone's head. And we need to manage how people do those things effectively. So I think the first thing you want to do is think about the flow of information in your workflow. So this is just an example, but typically people will have ideas. How do we help the best ideas jump to the surface? How do we communicate effectively in terms of our mediums, but also the conduct on those mediums? How do we plan well? Some communities are very ad hoc. Some have structured planning and use agile and burn down and whatever else. How do we develop software? How do we build great software? How do we have great principles in our software development? How do we do quality, continuous integration, and various other bits and pieces? How do we ship effectively? Not just how do we stick binaries on the internet, but how do we support them? How do we engage our users? How do we get people to participate in a way that feels fulfilling? And then how do we govern our projects effectively? And all these different pieces are important, but I think the important thing is knowing the order in which these things tend to happen. Because most of us actually operate in fairly linear ways. The way you go to a restaurant, if you go to Olive Garden, you go to a really fancy restaurant, it's the same basic order. You get there, you get a table, you get menus, you get water, you pick your food, you pay your bill, and off you go. What defines the experience is the quality of the food and the environment and the seating and the ambience, all those different pieces. So first thing I think is figure out that workflow and then look at the pieces that you glue into it, like Slack for communication or ZenHub for planning. And one thing I'd highly advise against is picking one thing that does everything, because you can't find one thing that does everything well. This was the mistake that SourceForge made. The benefit here is today we live in a world where you can glue these different pieces together. And then I think what we want to do is look at how we build that interface to get people using that workflow effectively. So for example, for new people, I think you want to build something that I've been calling the new developer on-ramp for a while. And there's basically 6 pieces to it that I'm going to walk through. So imagine someone's brand new to edX rather. They're here, and up there at the top right-hand corner, they've done something, they're feeling really good about what they've done. Okay? This provides 6 pieces that you should put in place in every community, in every company to do this well. The first piece is discovering it, making it easy for people to discover that you can actually participate. This is going to be your blogging, your social media, your YouTube videos, having a website that makes it very clear that the community is at the heart of what we do and how we produce great things. The second piece is make it really easy to get your tool chain set up. I see this problem all the time in GitHub projects where you have a README file that says, hey, this is this project, but it doesn't tell you how to actually build the code. You should be able to make it one-click easy for people to get your tool chain set up. And also, much as I'm using a Mac now, not just for Macs, but for Windows and for Linux as well. The next piece is, so someone's discovered it, they're excited, they get their tool chain set up. Now what they need to do is learn the skills to participate. So this is going to be things such as, in programming terms, it's going to be coding conventions and coding styles and how the code is laid out and how it works and how the project operates and how code review works. You should provide knowledge and documentation about how all of these different pieces work. And importantly, this is not just about writing lots of words on a web page. Twitter has taught us that people don't like to consume large pieces of information anymore, that we have to condense that down as small as possible. Then once you've learned that knowledge, the next thing to do is to figure out something to work on. And this in itself is complicated. We want to make sure, for example, that new developers can pick something that's small but fulfilling, okay? One of the things I recommend for projects is that you tag easy bugs with a bite-sized label. And then, because then you can have a big list of bugs that are suitable for new developers. Don't give a developer a giant, uncertain task for them to work on. Otherwise, they'll never succeed. You want them to get something up and running and be successful within an hour. The next piece, I think, is going to be finding help. And this is critically important, is having a support resource that people can look at that's not only filled with people who can actually help, but has a tonality of no question is stupid. Remember, that's one of our fears for our user persona, is looking stupid. So the way in which we construct all of these things is look at that user persona to guide the policies and the technology and how these pieces glue together. And then finally, and I think possibly most important, is that when that person has discovered your on-ramp, they've set the tools up, they've learned what to do, they found a task, they've done it, they've asked for help, and they've done the whole thing out in the open, naked in front of the community. That's a huge accomplishment. Even if they fixed a tiny little string fix, that's a huge accomplishment. We need to make those people feel really good about themselves. And this is thanking them personally. This is not having a computer send them a thank you email. No one likes that. This is making them feel good, because that recognition will fuel them for the next task that they do. And then before you know it, you're building momentum. Now, that's the new role. For the regular people, the people who are regularly participating in the projects, it's different, because they do this cycle. And typically, you want these people to understand the context of what's happening, understand the standards of engagement, such as coding conventions and how things operate. You want them to be able to chat with each other and discuss with each other around ideas, to be able to write code, submit pull requests, engage in continuous integration and testing, engage in effective code review, and then feel some kind of intrinsic or extrinsic reward for that. And what's important, and where this is different, is with a new developer on-ramp for new developers, it's about making sure that each step neatly connects to the next step. With this, it's about making sure that this is covered in WD-40, that it's completely frictionless. Because when one of these bits becomes annoying and sticks out, people won't want to do it. It's kind of like, if you work in a company where you're building great code, for example, but the way in which you submit your timesheets or expenses is really irritating, you don't end up submitting timesheets and expenses and you get into trouble or you have no money left. So we want to look at that workflow and make sure that's efficient. And for our core developers, I think it's basically a similar workflow, but you want them to make sure that they have influence in the areas that they really care about. And that's going to be things like writing code, pull requests, CI, and reviews. Like developers typically care about the effectiveness of writing code. And you want to make sure that as people build their reputations in the community, that they can influence the workflow that they're participating in. And that's a really fundamental but core element here. So I'd say the other thing here is, when looking at all of this, what's really important is that we track the workflow of how we're doing this. I remember going to a conference, and I was sat at the airport having a beer, and I got sat next to this guy, and he just said to me one time, if you're not counting, it doesn't matter. And I think that's a really important point, is that we should count everything. The problem with modern software development is that we end up with a dashboard that looks like this. And everybody rambles on about Google Analytics and all these different numbers and statistics that you can count. And everybody talks about numbers. But in reality, just having more numbers doesn't matter. What matters in my mind is you count the numbers, but you focus on the trends and the patterns. Okay? And it's about gluing these numbers together in interesting ways. So for example, if you want to look at the effectiveness of code review, you would look at how many pull requests are coming in, how quickly the first comment appears in that pull request, how quickly the overall pull request takes to get reviewed and merged, how many rounds of reviews and changes there needs to be, how many developers are participating in that code review process. When you glue those different pieces of information together in different ways, it gives you an outcome. It gives you a trend that you can actually work with. So I'm going to zip through the rest of this because I'm conscious of time, but the final piece here is participation. How do we actually, we've understood people, we've mapped out the optimal workflow based upon those principles of human beings. Now, how do we actually get people in? How do we get them onto that new developer on-ramp particularly? I have a rule that I've developed, which I call the 1066 rule, which has got nothing to do with the medieval times. You don't go around, using the Iron Maiden on people. The point here is that of your community, about 10% of them are going to be highly engaged, okay? That's generally the maths that people tend to look at. And there is a principle in psychology that if you want anybody to change their habits, it takes 66 days to develop a habit. So everybody in this room, everyone will want to develop a new habit. Some of you will want to eat less fast food. Some of you will want to work out more, things like that. It takes 66 days from you starting to do that religiously to get to the point where it just becomes autopilot. So the goal that we should have here is at any one time, 10% of our audience is always working towards 66 days of service in the community. If we do that, we end up building our community significantly. And one of the things I recommend is you look at that first 66 days and you map that out into what happens at which different points. Now, there is another rule here as well, which I call the 1% rule, which has got nothing to do with Wall Street bankers. And the basic principle here is that of that overall community, 1% of them will be your freaking rock stars. These will be the people who show up every day, who care about every intimate detail, who are like the people you call in the evenings to get advice from. Really take care of those people. They will all start out in the 10% initially. Well, they'll start out in the 100%, then they'll go to the 10%, and then we'll become the 1%. In the same way that we build relationships in anything, take care of these people. These are the people you fly to conferences. These are the people you send emails to. These are the people you phone. These are the people you send thank you cards. These are the people you send a card to when they have children. Like, you really take care of them. These are the lifelong friendships that you build. And I think what's interesting is that we can look at how we build effective participation by inspiring ourselves from salespeople. How many of you are in this room work in sales? Okay, a couple of people. Same level of sheepishness from earlier on, by the way. Salespeople get a hard... You what? They eat at McDonald's. Salespeople get a hard time because some people think that salespeople just go out there and blindly con people into giving them money. And that's only partially true. But salespeople have this notion of like you have prospects who are just the world, you convert them into leads, and then you qualify those leads, and then they become opportunities. And opportunities are the things that you can actually do, and then they become clients. And what's interesting is that these 4 areas are potential, viability, relationships, and then actual engagement. And I think we can take some of those similar principles and apply that to how we build communities. Because you've got potential, but that's capturing someone's interest. The viability is getting them to be curious about your project and your community. And then we actually twist these 2 around, and we have submission is the engagement, and participation is how we build those relationships. And twisting that around is the important piece, is that what we're doing here is we're getting people excited, we get them to do something first of all, and then we use that as a starting point for building those really strong relationships. Okay? So we've already talked about this, the submission piece, which is all that workflow that we talked about earlier on. But when we look at these 2 pieces, this is about attracting people in. And I think there's a few things we can look at here. Having a really simple but really focused website. You know, don't have a wiki with loads of text on it. It should look like a product website. Put together a blog, but also importantly, have a content plan. You know, everybody who builds a community sets up a blog. But don't just do that. Say for the next 6 months, we want 3 posts a week. These are the topics we're going to write about. These are the people who are going to write them. These are the deadlines when they have to be done. That regular content schedule will get your community up and running. Do the same thing for social media, but importantly, don't cover every boneheaded social media network out there. Cover the important ones. I found that Twitter and Facebook are the most important too. But you know, look at what's popular at any one time and make it culturally relevant. In China, it's not going to be Twitter and Facebook, for example. Build a knowledge base which has got that documentation and help that people can have so you can reduce the level of hand-holding for people getting up the on-ramp. And then build partner relationships. Build relationships with other organizations and groups so you can start growing your community out further. And then the other piece is how we build those relationships. And I think the way in which we do that is we really focus on building someone's reputation in a community. Communities are fundamentally meritocracies. And people talk a lot of smack about meritocracies because they're not really very accurate. But the basic principle is that you build your reputation based upon great work. And that's what we want to do here. And we build relationships with those people who do that. This is also about great leadership, and we lead by example. There's a lot of controversy in some communities about conduct and how people operate as leaders. I don't care what those people say. It matters. If you're a leader, you have to lead by example. And if you don't lead by example, the culture will reflect the worst traits of leaders. That passes on to conduct and making sure that we create an inclusive environment for everybody, and that we help people to evolve, like through those status types and through those levels of relatedness. And then finally, an interesting thing to explore as well is gamification. But gamification, importantly, is usually only useful when they get for the first 15 to 20 badges. At about 20 badges, people stop caring about the badges. So gamification is a useful tool for new people coming in, but most regular people and core people generally don't care about it as much, with some relative exceptions. So bringing this into a conclusion, the most important thing I'd say is be an eternal student. You know, I feel very fortunate because people say I wrote the book in community. I don't know what I'm talking about. I've learned some things over the years, and the amount that I've learned since I wrote that book is phenomenal. You know, and this happens with everything and everyone who does this. So we're eternal students. No one knows everything, and the only way in which we grow is to actually look at the people who this affects, not at other community managers and other community builders. So in summary, I'm going to walk through this real quick. Create new regular and core roles. Set your expectations clearly. Build your user personas for those roles. Identify those behavioral patterns and opposites. Identify the workflow and deploy your infrastructure. Create those on-ramps for the new roles and that frictionless workflow for regular and core roles. Measure trends and patterns, not just the numbers. Focus on that 10%, getting them up and running, but then really look after your 1% and get them working for 66 days to build habits. Build your interest and curiosity, implement great participation architecture, and then finally assume the role of an eternal student. And I think we don't have time for Q&A, so thank you, everyone.
Okay, so we're going to get started here. The State of Open edX talk. This is a short talk. We'll just be giving an update on what's been going on in the community, some of the things that have happened in the last year, and what we're looking forward to. Just to kick things off, so I want to introduce myself. So I'm Joel Barchauskas. I'm the manager for the Open edX team at edX. I'm trying to make this community as successful and productive as possible. I came from a company called Blue State Digital about a year ago. If you've ever received an email from Barack Obama, I was in part responsible, so I apologize, because if you received one, you received at least 5,000. And it was my job to make them send them even faster. So that's just a little bit about me. But before we get started here, I want to take a minute to, again, thank Jono and Anant. They had some incredible, inspiring words, and I think I'd like to give them another quick round of applause. I know Jono's talk was basically laying out my roadmap for the next year, so I appreciate that. I'd like to thank the Stanford team, Richard, Carrie, Brent, Melissa, Bob, Eric, and everyone whose names I'm forgetting or don't know yet. This has been, so far, an amazing experience working with them and making this conference possible. They truly have made this conference possible. They even brought us this amazing weather. So a big round of applause for Stanford also. So we have, like I said at the start, we've had an incredible number of people contribute to this conference. We have OpenCraft and Extension Engine, our lunch sponsors. You'll be hearing from each of them today and tomorrow, talking about their experience with the OpenEdX platform and the really interesting work that they're doing. And I'm really excited to hear from them. I'd also like to thank AppSembler, Arbisoft, and Edcast, our premier sponsors. And all 5 of them are set up in the Bishop foyer here. They're demo tables. So I'd really like to encourage you all to go out there, start a conversation, see what they're doing. They're all really great contributors to the community, and we appreciate their support in making this conference possible. I'd also like to talk about a few of our other sponsors. Abstract Technology, a new sponsor this year. We're really excited to have them join us. Also, MERP Science and Technology Company, Perpetual Learning, and EduStack. So a few notes, if you haven't seen already, we're using the conference tag hashtag OpenEdX 2016. If you haven't joined us on Slack, the hot new online chat tool, you can join at bit.ly/OpenEdX-Slack, and there's a channel there for just chatting about the conference, talking about what you're seeing here, what you've learned, keeping the conversations going. I really encourage everyone to join there and get involved. There's also hackathon-related chat rooms, hackathon and hack-star for different teams to use for their hackathon projects. We also have Birds of a Feather. These are sessions for just having a group discussion about a topic that you're interested in. It might be something that's covered in a panel here. It might be something that we don't have programming around and you want to really engage the community in a conversation. There's already been a number signed up there in the Lathrop second floor, 290, 292, 294, and 299. If you go to the conference schedule website, which is con.openedx.org/schedule. There's a link there to, within each of the Birds of a Feather sessions, there's a link to a Confluence page where you can either start your own or see what other people are doing. And then they're during lunch, the afternoon break tomorrow morning, and lunch and the afternoon break again tomorrow. So you're free to join or create any of those sessions, and we really encourage you to do so. It's a great opportunity to meet other people in the community who share your interests. And then a logistical note, we have a room change. So anything that was listed in the program as Lathrop 190 has been moved to Lathrop 282. So that has been updated on the website, but in the printed program, it's listed as Lathrop 190. And to be completely transparent about it, it's because this conference is such a success. We wanted to move it to a larger space to make room for everyone that's here. So that is just a logistical note. So all of the breakout sessions that start immediately following this will be in this room, Lathrop 180 and Lathrop 282. Of course, now it stops working. And now I'd like to introduce our CTO at edX, Mark Hazelton.
Thanks, Joel. So just a couple slides, intro, and some other people are going to get up and talk. But just really exciting for me to be here. This is my second conference. I joined edX about a little bit over a year ago. So, one of the main reasons I came to edX was to get to work on the open source project and work with the community. So I'm really looking forward to interacting with all of you, over the next couple days. Oh, someone's got an alarm going off. There you go. So just want to reinforce, how dedicated we are to being open and interacting with the open community. So as Jana was saying, learning from all of you about what you need from us in order to be successful. So, we really believe that we're going to be a better project, a better company if we get all of your input. So, we have a bunch of different open communication channels today, Jira, Wiki. We're redesigning our architectural process. Our chief architect, Eddie Fagan's going to talk about it in a minute. And then the new Slack chat room we're going to talk a little bit more about as well. But, really use these channels to give us feedback. We're here for your benefit and want to know what you think. So I just thought I'd be pretty explicit about what the goal is. So at least from my perspective, we're seeing more and more problems that are manifesting themselves as scalable education delivery challenges. So people trying to reach large numbers of people with educational content. And at least for the Open edX project, we think we're the solution there, and we want to be the solution there. So the idea is to really foster education worldwide. I think that's obvious, but allowing a different array of organizations to participate in the project is also a big goal of ours. To relieve the burden of platform development from content providers, so people that can focus on educational delivery, as opposed to the mechanics of managing users and delivering videos. We really want to promote interoperability of courseware so that you can move potentially from platform to platform if they're Open edX-based sites, and really encourage reuse of proven models. So as we see things that work, start to advertise that and get more adoption across the board. So from my perspective, we're just getting started. This is a really exciting time for Open edX. So, and I'm pretty, confident I can make all these statements. We're definitely seeing accelerating adoption. So we're going to go through some of those numbers, but we're seeing more and more people on the project. Definitely a wider variety of organizations. As Anant mentioned this morning, we're seeing governments, we're seeing corporations, we're seeing universities. It's a pretty wide range, and that's just awesome to see. And the scale of the problems that they're trying to solve seems to be growing. So I'm now getting inquiries from people that want to set up sites that rival the size of edX.org, which is fairly new. Like, you're not seeing usually people come along and say, hey, I want to set up a 10 million learner site. But that's really what's happening. And to me, I think we're just scratching the surface. So back to this whole innovator, early adopter phase. Like, I just feel like we're just about getting started. And it's just an exciting time to be part of it. So in terms of investing in our future, and we're going to talk a little bit more about each one of these items, but our engineering team at edX has grown pretty aggressively in the past year. It's about a 50% increase. And I think any engineer, there are a lot of them here at the conference that can tell you that. Everybody at edX participates in the open source project in some way. Either they're helping, guiding, reviewing, whatever, they're participating. We're making some strategic investments in architecture, including hiring a new chief architect, Eddie, who's going to be talking to you in a few minutes, and very excited about that. We really have a group-wide focus on extensibility and modularity in the system. So for newer projects, that's a primary requirement as opposed to an afterthought. And we're looking at different sustainable ways to support the community. And so that's my kind of main takeaway that I'd like you to take from this talk is, how do we help you broaden the reach of the project? So again, Jana mentioned that chasm that I think we're approaching. Like, how do we get over that? What would you want to see? How can we help? And we're definitely, here over the next few days or through the communication channels we mentioned, give us your feedback and tell us what you need. And with that, I think I'm going to bring Joel back up.
Thanks, Mark. So I just want to set a little context. I think, some of you are new, some of you have been here since the beginning, but just to set the context for what we're seeing in terms of the community growth and the exciting things that have been happening. So the design of the platform, was started really in September of 2011 by Anant and his team. They offered the first on-campus SPOC, February of 2012. First MOOC in March of 2012. And then, we started seeing edX.org starting to take off January 2013, 20 MOOCs and over 500,000 learners on edX.org. So you see here, June 2013 was really the birth of the Open edX project, and as Anant touched on, really driven by our great partners here at Stanford. We really appreciate everything that they did to help make that possible. And so, we're here now, June 2016, 3 years later, really celebrating the third birthday of the project. And I believe we'll actually have some treats later in the conference, specifically geared towards celebrating that event. So October 2014, we're up to 2.3 million learners on edX.org, but we're also starting to see Open edX platform adoption, 40 Open edX sites, 500 Open edX courses. September 2015, just around the last conference, we were up to 140 Open edX sites and 1,800 Open edX courses. So this is a representation of sort of the trajectory of the growth that Mark was alluding to. And you just see that it really is growing and accelerating. You can see here, so there's this spot here, right, like this step function. So what happened here? So the way that we don't ask people to register their instances. We don't have, you don't have to fill out a form to download or get set up. So we really have to go out and talk to people and find out, who is using the platform. So we took some time, really just a few days in January to say, like, all right, so what are we missing? Like, what's happening out there that we don't know about yet? And we found an additional 50 sites that we did not know about previously, just through our effort of going out, talking to people, searching, and finding what's happening. So as you can see here, we're just keep on going up and up. So today, so that brings us to today, right? So over 250 Open edX sites and over 3,700 courses on those sites. That's incredible. That is an incredible number. That is an incredible reach of the platform, and it really just, I think, speaks to the power of the platform and the great work that everyone is doing to expand the reach of education and providing education in a scalable way. We really believe that the community is critical to. That's a first. I know, right? I'm looking to see if anyone has any idea what to do.
Out, I think 4 hours, and it shuts itself
Oh.
off, so you may have to just
Screen down. There's a screen down button. Yeah, all right. Cool. The projecting system could not handle the excitement of over 250 Open edX sites. Let's see. Is this? Yeah. Projecting. How's everyone doing? How about those calves?
Man walks into a bar.
So I assume that it's the projector. There we go. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, I appreciate everyone waiting through here. I'm trying to think if there's something that I can skip to that I can speak to.
Well, how does one go about making sure that you know about their site?
How does one go about? So that's a great question. So definitely reaching out. At Joel on Slack. Join the Slack team. That's a really great way. We just message me privately. We do have a survey that we've distributed in the past where we've asked just a few key questions about what people are doing and what people's sites look like. That really helps us when we're trying to figure out, how we can best support the community. It's really great for us to understand what sorts of hosting options people are using, what the size is, what their use cases are, and those sorts of things. So, we've promoted that survey in the past, and we'll continue to push it out to people. In the future, we may have other mechanisms of sort of getting people to sort of give us feedback in a more streamlined way. But we're interested, it really does help us as an organization, and I think it would help the project as a whole. So if you have ideas about how, we can sort of put that information together and use it, definitely reach out and let me know. So these are just some of the organizations, building off of Anant's slide that, represent the Open edX ecosystem of people providing educational content. It's really astounding the diversity in terms of the types of content, the geography, the languages. We have over 50 countries, over 40 languages. Courses have been offered in over 40 languages across the platform. So, again, it continues to impress. And then some more numbers, in addition to those 250 sites, Anant talked about the 8 million edX.org learners. We've counted for around 5.5 million Open edX learners just in our conversations with people and through those surveys and things like that. Again, as Anant said, that does not represent the entire base. There are so many sites that are either private, people behind firewalls, or otherwise, difficult for us to discover, that, we really think that, probably it's, at least equal to the number of people on edX.org. So we think, there's at least 13.5 million people learning on the Open edX platform at this time, but we think that, it's probably even more than that. So we talked a little bit about the Slack team. So when I started, we used IRC as our real-time chat collaboration. There was about 40 people on average on IRC. We had a really great experience using Slack. Actually, Bertrand Marone from Ionis X, created a 2015 Open edX conference Slack channel that people really liked. We applied for and received a Slack team for the Open edX project, as edX is a nonprofit. I really thought that there's a huge potential here, just based on other projects. I have a friend that works on WordPress. When they moved from IRC to Slack, they went from about 100 people on IRC to over 1,000 people on Slack. The fact that we actually went from 40 on IRC, starting from 0 on Slack, to 800 plus in just 7 months. That 20x growth over IRC, like that to me is just amazing. I mean, this is the number of people who have invested enough to actually sign up and log in and start seeing what people are talking about the project. That's actually like a substantial amount of investment. And then there's obviously the people who are driving the conversation. We're up to on average around 200 people reading, 50 people writing a day. And the jagged lines here are all just on the weekend it's a little quieter. This growth, and we're really interested in continuing to drive participation in that forum as a way for edX and the community to interact and the community to work together. And then here, just again, emphasizing the value of Slack. We have multiple different communication tools. We write a lot of documentation on Read the Docs, on Confluence, and on the mailing lists. But we really like the interactivity and close collaboration that Slack provides. These are some of the channels where our most frequent conversations are happening. One of the big breakthroughs, I think, for just transparency and collaboration was moving all of our architecture discussion to the Slack architecture channel, which really represented just an effort to be as transparent with, I think, the decisions that most affect all of you in the community, and being able to get your input on those. And so speaking of architecture, I'd like to introduce our chief architect, Eddie Fagan.
Definitely need to lower it a couple inches for me. Thanks, Joel. I was a bit nervous. I've been at edX as chief architect for about 4 months now. Started in January. It's been a wild ride. Thinking about coming up here to talk, the nudist colony thing rang true for me. And then the thing went up, and now I don't feel as bad anymore. It's going to be great. Thanks, Joel, for pioneering that for all of us. So my job at edX is really to set the long-term technology vision for the Open edX platform. I've been working on large-scale distributed systems for my whole career, and jumping into the Open edX platform has been awesome. The passion and the energy from all of you that was the reason I joined. As Mark said, same reason for me, and I have not been disappointed. So thank you, all of you. If I haven't met you, which is almost everybody in this room, please come find me at some point during the conference. I would love to talk about architecture. It's what I do. So to that, I just wanted to quickly touch on, as Joel was mentioning, some of the improvements we've been making just in the last 4 months about architecture, just to try to make it more transparent. That's something that I value very, very heavily, something that the whole team does. So architecture on Slack, you'll find me there. You'll find my whole team there. We're very passionate about sometimes not architecture topics in there, but we try to keep it on message. We've got a new Jira project to keep track of longer-term roadmap items. We reorganized the wiki, so we've been doing a lot of tooling work. Mark briefly touched on this, but we're also in the middle of launching a new process for making decisions that have to do with longer-term planning, which we're calling the Open edX proposal process, or OEP. If you look at GitHub under the Open edX proposals repo, for those that are interested, there's a little more detail under OEP 1 about what it is we're trying to do. The point, though, is really to make the proposal process for making decisions. I have an idea. I want to pitch it to all of you, get that written down, have a formal process for actually talking about it, getting to a decision, and then having an actual artifact that we can reference later. For those of you that have been involved in the processes to date, that is an area of improvement that I think we are really going to make strides in over the next year. So we're very excited about that. In addition, I don't know how many of you know this, but there's actually a team of architects at edX. We're the ones trolling around the architecture Slack room. We have a lot of passion about the long-term vision of the platform. It's my team. Just jump in, ask us any questions you have. And I view all of you as well as architects and helping shape where we're going. So a very exciting time for us. I thought it was worth, especially coming in new, new guy coming in, let's make a mission for the team. So I came up with 4 values for the architecture team, and this was very much a work in progress. We went through this a couple of rounds. Where we landed on were 4 key values: autonomy, context, efficiency, and design. And we try to stick to these in every idea we come up with, decision we're trying to push through, discussion we have. These are core to how we want to operate as a team. So when you think about the long-term design of the system, these are all really, really important to us. So I just wanted to leave them up here for a second. I'm not going to go through all of them. One, just as an example that I'm going to dive into, is context. And just being a good community, having a lot of transparency, I think context is really important. Having a clear vision is really important. So to that end, I'm going to tell a very brief story, which is, for those of you that have developed on the Open edX platform, so quick show of hands and leave them up. How many of you have contributed to the Open edX platform in one form or another? Okay, of those people with their hands still up, how many of you have seen this diagram? Okay, that's more people raise their hands too. Keep them up. How many people understand this diagram? Those 3 people with their hands up, come find me after this. I have some questions for you. So, thank you. Thank you for volunteering. The same McDonald's people, I think, from earlier. So when I first joined edX, I found this diagram on the Open edX portal. It was made a couple of years ago to try to make sense of our architecture, which is pretty complicated for those that know it. And this diagram is actually not a bad diagram. It has all of the key elements, all the relationships, and it makes a lot of sense if you have a PhD in the Open edX platform. I didn't at the time. So when it comes to context and really having a clear vision about where we're going, we felt it was really important to try to restructure some of our collateral, some of the messaging. This diagram, which you can take a picture of it if you want. It's on the Open edX portal now. I replaced the old picture with the new one just before the conference. So that was conference-driven development. I'll credit someone else with that one. The diagram, though, just to give you a quick example of what we're trying to do, and again, my job as chief architect is to set a vision and draw a lot of boxes on a lot of whiteboards. That's what architects, that's all that we do. We're very excited about drawing on whiteboards. I was looking forward to this going up so I could just redraw this on the board. On the left is the edX platform code base and our attempt to show that it's a lot of stuff. And then on the right, these independently deployed applications. These are new services that are autonomous. Some of you are familiar with what we're doing there. This is trying to show that, yeah, that exists. That's a formal part of our system. And we're trying to move more in that direction. We're trying to ultimately reduce the complexity of the edX platform code base. We know it's complicated. We know we have a lot of work to do. And it's a big focus for the architecture team over the next year. So I'm really excited about that. In addition, we're trying to push extensibility and interoperability. We've heard what a lot of you have said. We know we've got a lot of work to do in this area, and we're really excited to tackle that. Some other things I'll mention before handing it off. We've had a couple of key technology wins over the last year. Some of you are familiar with these. Thank you to everybody who helped build them. A lot of you in the room were part of that. Comprehensive theming, our pattern library, our UI toolkit, so a lot of front-end development's a great and big way in which a lot of people extend the platform. And new autonomous services, programs and credentials, and our newer catalog service. I'm not going to go into those in too much detail. What I'm going to do is hand it over to Marco Morales, who is on our product team, who's going to dive into both our technology and our product changes that have just happened and are coming soon. So with that, I'll hand it over to Marco. Thank you.
If you'll humor me for one moment. There we go. Great. So hi, everyone. For those of you who haven't met me, Marco Morales. I've been at edX a long time. I used Yahoo's time machine to figure out how many courses were on the site the day that I met Anant. I think there were like 7 courses. I think the day that I came in, there was scrambling to get the 8th and 9th course launched, something in that time frame. But my background is engineering. But I've also worked at various education companies. So previously at places that did K through 5 work, middle school work, then high school. And so edX is the first place I've been at that did higher ed work. And I'm here on behalf of the product team to show you a summary of some of the Open edX named releases. So the last one, or the current one, Dogwood. The next one coming up soon, Eucalyptus. As well as what's coming in 2 to 4 months. So what's beyond Eucalyptus, still not named. Great, so Dogwood. So, and actually one thing I do want to make sure I note is a number of these actual contributions from Dogwood and Eucalyptus are things that were actually community driven. So you'll actually see a number of features that you yourselves contributed to the platform on this list that we're really excited to highlight. I think that's a really important part and message to mention here. So Dogwood was released February of 2016. So some of the things on the platform and commerce side that we wanted to highlight: video, data, and insights. So Insights is the tool that we use to expose and visualize data that's coming out of data pipeline. So there's video data now in that. Comprehensive theming, improved certificate generation for those of you that have Open edX instances that issue certificates. And LTI block, so you can actually drop in other external content into your Open edX courses. An upgrade to Django 1.8, pattern library and UI toolkit. And then finally, a new auto commerce system which actually deprecates the old shopping cart. And we've been building on top of that since then. Dogwood, on the teaching and learning side of things, so for those of you that aren't familiar, we actually have a mobile application, so iOS and Android. And the original version of that was actually primarily a video companion app. So students could actually download the videos and watch those asynchronously. We've also now included the ability to see assessments and HTML. So you can actually get a full course outline through your mobile application and consume that content on the go if you want. Improvements to the open response problem type to allow file uploads, timed exams, as Anant mentioned earlier, partial credit, which was also a community feature, the ability to preview the course as specific student so that support teams and course teams can actually understand what problems students are encountering. So next, Eucalyptus. So Eucalyptus is scheduled for sometime in July. So these are the things that we are confident are able to be a part of that. So this was already brought up, but a couple new services. So a course catalog service, a program service. And programs are essentially collections of courses. It's what's helped power the X series work that you see on edX.org. The credential service, so moving from just the certificate model that we have to allow for more extensible and more interesting kinds of credentials. So this credential service powers that. Improved account settings, multi-site theming support, and then coupon codes as a part of that commerce system and auto that we talked about. A next big sort of part of Eucalyptus is per learner insights. So again, yet more ways to help visualize the data that's coming through that data pipeline so that you can get a sense of what students are doing inside your course, how they're engaging with videos, problems, discussions, and it's just a first step for us. There's a whole lot more we want to do in this space, but it's a really exciting one. So next up on the teaching and learning side for Eucalyptus, so improvements to the course navigation. So for those of you that are familiar with the old courseware tab, that was the second tab in the course. So some updates to that, as well as a couple new applications for various sort of kind of goals within your course. So bookmarking, teams, and student notes are three of the sort of big applications. Video closed captions. So for those of you who have been involved with the platform, you've seen the transcripts, but you also now have an ability to sort of show the more classic closed captions over the video. Open response staff grading. So Anand also mentioned that you can actually do some hand grading of certain kinds of problem types, so some effort put into that. And then finally, an easy way for courses to move from being instructor-paced, which sort of have deadlines and are sort of more semesterally bound, to a self-paced model where deadlines kind of fade away. Next, so Eucalyptus has a number of improvements in the mobile department. So additional support for learner profiles, discussion forums on mobile, native course discovery, as well as push notifications. Those are all part of Eucalyptus. And a quick note on what's coming next, 2 to 4 month outlook on what comes after Eucalyptus. So on the platform and commerce side, order history for students so they can get a sense of what purchases they've made if you've got the commerce system enabled. Bulk program purchasing. So again, programs are when you have collections of courses. So you could upfront opt to join this entire program and collection of courses. Direct enrollment into those programs, as well as integration points for payment providers of different types. On the teaching and learning side, we have a full width course content and navigation. And the outline. So again, expanding the learning hall, which is the word we used to attribute with the little area you used to actually engage with content in. Improvements to the discussion forum. Assignment dates based on learners' time zones, so learners can tell you what part of the world they're in and have those dates be more meaningful to them instead of having to force them to translate to UTC. Grading improvements, so we can actually deliver clearer visual in-context course progress in the LMS, as opposed to sort of having that be a big operation and computation. And that's a summary of Dogwood, Eucalyptus, and what's next. I'll hand it back to Joel.
Thanks, Marco. I'll be quick with these since we're just about to run into the session breakout time, so we'll push those out a few minutes since we just have lunch after that. So, we've seen a really great response from the community in the Open edX release program, and that's definitely something that we're excited about continuing. We want to continue to enhance our communication around what's coming and what release, shortening the cycle time between when we start the release process and when that release is available, so that more features are available to you all quicker. Things like that. We're really, building on some of what Jono was talking earlier. We're really on board with the concept of making it easier for people to get onboarded quicker and figure out what they want to do and figure out the information they need to do what they're interested in doing with the platform. And the Open edX portal, as it stands right now, is a great place to get a lot of different kinds of information, but it's not necessarily clear for you to figure out exactly, who am I and how do I get to the information that I need. So that's something we're going to be investing in. We're continuing to work to improve the transparency of our roadmaps and let you all know what it is that we are working on and prioritizing so that you can plan for it, so that you can contribute to it, so that you can build on it and continue to do the awesome things that you're all doing. And then finally, we've had a lot of success around this working group model. We've tried it in different ways. The campus working group has been a huge contributor to the Open edX project, leading a number of initiatives around LTI, third-party authentication, and those sorts of things. CCX, another one. And we're using a similar model with pioneering adaptive learning technologies and how to integrate them into the platform. And we're really excited to see the uptake and the wide variety of people that have joined that working group. And we're excited to see what we're learning from that and how we can use what we learned from that experience to continue to expand the community's involvement and influence over the direction of the product and contributions. So ultimately, it all boils down to the last line here. We've said it and we'll keep saying it for the next 2 days and on into the next year. We really want to hear from you. What do you need to be successful? How can we make you all successful and help all of us achieve this mission of providing a quality education for everyone, everywhere? And with that, I'd like to say thanks and enjoy the conference. So again, on just a quick programming note, so Lathrop 190 is moved to 282, and since we ran about 5 minutes long, we'll start the next set of sessions at 11:35 and just let them run an extra 5 minutes late.